big picture, just like swooping out a little bit, another Middle Eastern war. Like, I think the overwhelming majority of Americans, and certainly the overwhelming majority of Trump voters, like, wait a second, no. So, and in fact, the president was elected to some large extent on the promise to not get us involved in another forever war. So I just have really been struck, but you're the expert, by how much pressure is applied to the administration to do this, to get us involved in another war in the Middle East. Did you feel that?
I think there clearly is a very strong coalition within the United States that wants us to see another war in the Middle East, and it crosses both parties. Just to point something out, and I wrote about this in Foreign Affairs with a friend of mine, Reed Smith. During the campaign, the Democrats attacked Trump for being too dovish on Iran. And they attacked him for not doing more after killing Soleimani, not doing more after some of the Iranian drone strikes on Saudi Arabia in 2019. They accused him of being too weak on Iran. And the Democrat Party trotted out Liz Cheney, of all people, and the endorsement of her father, had her going to battleground states, talking about the importance of staying, quote, strong in the Middle East and continuing to fund an unwinnable war in Ukraine. And that was the position they adopted. So it's kind of transcended the traditional right-left way we think about American foreign policy that came into being at the end of the Cold War, or even before that. It really predates the end of the Cold War. It really goes back to the Cold War, where in the post-Vietnam era especially, the Democrats were the doves, Republicans were the hawks. It really kind of transcends that. And you have this transpartisan movement to keep America engaged in the world. And I think it's good for America to be engaged in the world, but engaged in the world so that their primary purpose is not to protect American interests or safety or the conditions of American prosperity, but to ensure that America is enforcing liberal hegemony. So getting back to Iran, there's a lot of reasons why people want war with Iran. I think when it comes down to it, is a lot of people still think you can do regime change wars successfully in the Middle East.
Regime change wars? I thought this was all about getting rid of the whatever half dozen Iranian nuclear sites because we don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon.
Well, I think Donald Trump has exposed them because they're essentially, some of the biggest advocates of war with Iran, whether it's groups like Foundation for Defense of Democracy, writers at certain publications. Essentially, they are saying the problem with diplomacy is it doesn't lead to regime change, is that the policy should be regime change. It's almost like the nuclear issue is really about creating a pathway to regime change. And it really still goes back to this idea, is a lot of them deep down inside believe, and some of them say it out loud, that we could have made Iraq successful. And Iraq is just a mess. It is an absolute just cluster.
Well, it's a proxy of Iran, too,
yes.
The country they hate.
Let me just make a note on this. The most deadly forces in the middle, the forces that pose the most risk to the United States forces, are the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq. They are an official arm of the Iraqi government that we created after the invasion of Iraq in 2003, which we fund through aid, and whose troops that we train, still with a couple thousand troops in Iraq. So American troops in Iraq right now are getting attacked by people who are part of the same government that American troops are helping to support and whose security forces they're helping to train. It is the most counterproductive and insane foreign policy mission in the globe right now, and I hope the administration will make changes to that. But that's how I'm saying it is.
I don't understand. So, in the last, 22 years, 24 years, I guess, since 9/11, amazing, our record with regime change in the Middle East has been like 100% failure.
Yeah, and if you go to Libya, you go to Syria,
But
it's been
failure on
disaster.
every level. It hasn't.
Yes, even Yemen, you can include Yemen because we backed the old government before it collapsed and Yemen devolved into a civil
It
war.
hasn't made the United States safer or richer. It hasn't, by the way, I would argue, made our allies safer either. However much they may have wanted it, it hasn't been good for them either that I can see. And it's been a disaster for millions of people, human beings, in those countries. But mostly it hasn't helped the United States. So how could you, with a straight face, advocate for yet another regime change war against a real country that's not Libya, not Iraq, it's Iran, it's the Persian Empire? Like, how could you say that out loud? Are they actually saying that out loud?
Yeah, I mean, some of them do say it out loud. Yes, is that they think, oh, the Shah, the Shah's son has reemerged. I mean, this guy is he's the ultimate fail son in my view. And then you have groups like the MEK, People's Mujahideen of Iran, who pay a lot of American politicians to advocate for them and advocate for regime change. They are essentially saying, hey, we have governments in waiting that can just swoop in there and everything will be fine if you just get rid of the mullahs. Where have we heard that before?
It's hard to believe this is actually real.
I know it is. It is hard to
I mean, it's
believe
ignoring the most obvious facts of the last 30 years.
Yeah. It goes back to what I was saying about what I observed in the Pentagon, I think, is that it's easier to advocate for the same things over and over again than to say we should do something different.
But what do you make of the senator? I mean, maybe you have a different experience, but I just hear constantly about Republican senators. I'm sure there are Democrats too, but I hear about the Republicans, Lindsey Graham being the most obvious, but many others, constantly applying pressure to the administration to have a regime change war against Iran. I'm not going to confirm your nominees. We're going to hassle. I mean, like threatening the Trump administration in order to force them to lead a regime change war against Iran. What could possibly be their motive? What is that?
Now, we're sure you've heard plenty of those free phone promises from America's biggest wireless carriers. If those deals sound too good to be true, it's probably because they are very often too good to be true. They come with layers of fine print requiring you to sign up for 4 lines, plus activation fees, plus this, that, the other thing. You don't even understand what you're signing up for. And by the time you're done, you've paid for that free phone 3x. It was a pretty expensive free phone. It's kind of a scam, honestly. Our wireless company is called Pure Talk, and it's got a much better and much more straightforward offer, and it comes with no strings whatsoever attached. With a qualifying plan of just $35 a month, you get legitimately the brand new Samsung Galaxy A26 for free. It's actually free. There aren't hidden costs. You're not signing up the rest of your life or promising to name your kid after them or something. From virtually indestructible Gorilla Glass to next-generation camera lenses, the phone has basically everything that you want. All you need to do is switch to Pure Talk. $35 a month for unlimited talk, text, and 15 gigs of data with mobile hotspot, all on America's most dependable 5G network. Go to puretalk.com/Tucker to claim your free Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plan when you switch to Pure Talk, wireless by Americans for Americans.
Look, I think, and I've talked about this before in my past jobs, I think there's a disconnect in Washington, D.C. among elected Republicans, with the exception of those in the White House currently, between the base, what the base actually believes on foreign policy, and so the base very much doesn't want new wars.
Like the voters you're talking about, people who put them there.
And time again, you saw the majority of Republican voters in a lot of these primaries saying that they wanted fewer wars. Is the Republicans in a lot of cases were now less hawkish overall. And, polling, it doesn't tell the whole story all the time, but you saw voters, generally the Democrats are getting more hawkish primarily because of Ukraine, but you saw Republican voters and independent voters becoming more and more wary of foreign wars. However, because foreign policy, for a lot of voters, is often not a highly salient issue, it's not in their top 3, a lot of Republicans and Democrats are able to get elected despite having horrible records on foreign policy. Now, there are elections where it makes a difference. 2016, for example, there's real evidence that the fact that Donald Trump was viewed as less hawkish than Hillary Clinton played a decisive role in him winning Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. The counties that flipped from Obama to Trump, they had higher levels of what you call military sacrifice, so troops deployed, wounded, or killed, than some of their adjacent counties. So that likely contributed both to his 2016 and possibly his 2024 victory. Now, I have good, dear friends of mine that they're much smarter than me on polling and social science. They may disagree with that, but there have been times where actually the political incentives are to be less hawkish. But those don't show up in most elections. So you have a lot of Republican leaders in particular that are just disconnected from the base. Now, I think the good news is, though, is you're starting to see that change. And you saw that play out with Ukraine aid, where I think the last major Ukraine aid vote, and it may actually be the last major Ukraine aid vote yet ever, is I think you had over half of Senate Republicans vote against it and more than half of House members vote against it. And that went from, you only had 6 Republicans voting against the first big Ukraine aid package in 2022 and only 40 House Republicans to now, I believe, about 26, 27 senators, and then nearly 110, 113, somewhere in that range, House Republicans voting against it. So you've seen changes, and definitely the Republicans elected since 2018 in both the House and Senate, they're far less hawkish than people elected before then. That's indisputable.
Well, it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. And I don't think anyone who puts the interest of the United States first, who really does in his heart, could come around to another regime change war in Iran. That's almost prima facie evidence that you are not putting your country's interests first. That's the way it feels to me. Maybe I'm being uncharitable.
No, and I think this goes back to a simple belief of what is the purpose of American foreign policy. I believe, and I think President Trump, Vice President Vance, I believe even Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth, and others in the administration fundamentally believe the purpose of American foreign policy is to ensure American safety and the conditions of our prosperity. That doesn't mean we're going to ensure 3% GDP growth. It's the things that enable us to be prosperous. So, for example, prioritizing the defense of the Panama Canal over the negligible issue of which Eastern European oligarch gets to loot the Donbass. They believe that that is more important because the Panama Canal indisputably is more important to us than who controls the Donbass or who controls some desolate patch of desert in the Middle East.
So nicely put. Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.